So, Tina, I thought that perhaps it would be a good idea if I could ask Ananda to get us started on the topic of celebrities and how obsessed we are with celebrities in this culture. I mean, I have
Hmm.
gotten out of all the celebrity culture because it's like living vicariously through somebody that is so far removed from me that it doesn't even make any sense. But
Yep.
people do that and they compare themselves to them and they're always feeling less. So I would love to ask Ananda, what
Okay.
is it about it and what can people do to redirect?
Right. Before we do that, I'm totally up for that. I guess I just kind of want to reflect upon my experience as this happened, because we're starting at the beginning. And in the book, of course, it talks about how my sister's friend died and helped relieve her grief because she was so sad that he had died. And so, my sister shows up at my house, and lo and behold, this is the first time in a year that I've been asked to channel somebody other than Ananda. So it's very easy to skip over all of this kind of personal growth stuff. But I know a lot of you are learning to channel or are beginning channelers. And I think it's really good for me to kind of reflect back upon what I was going through at the time, because it's very easy to think, oh, she's done so many books and she's done so, but at this moment when I channeled for my sister, this was the first time I had ever channeled for anybody other than Ananda. So they had been training me for a year to surrender, to trust in the process. And they had said, we're never going to not show up. We'll always show up. And that was part of my first year of training. I'm sure you went through that too, Carol, when you're just like, what happens if I have a live stream set, organized? And this is something that maybe as audience members, you don't really think about because, well, we always show up, they always show up. But from the point of view as the channeler, of course, in those early days, you have no idea what the heck is going on. And when I channeled, gosh, I've forgotten his name.
Malcolm?
Malcolm. When I channeled Malcolm, I had no idea that was an opening in my consciousness that then gave them the opening. So I think that was what it was for from the beginning. I think they only used the suffering of a family member to get me to be compassionate, to open my mind enough to say, yes, I'd channel somebody else. And then they, as they said in the book, they put their foot in the door before it would slam shut again. And now there's a big, long line of people. Well, I'm at this stage, I'm like, what are you talking about? There's 20 dead celebrities that want to come through. I've gone through the year of channeling for Ananda, but I wasn't prepared for this in any way, shape, or form. I was like, what are you talking about? There's all these dead people who want to have something to say to the world. Like, I mean, it's so crazy. I had no support system. Nobody knew what I was doing. I didn't have Carol on the other end of a phone to go, what the heck? And so I just started the next day. I was like, okay. And really, when I reflect upon it, it's really kind of crazy that I said yes, and that I just every day just said, okay, somebody can come through. I think I'm a pretty reckless kind of person, and I've done some crazy things in my life, and this probably is right up there with one of the most crazy, to say, yes, I'll let these unknown beings come through. And of course, so anyway, I just kind of wanted to just share a little bit about the beginning of the process and how I didn't know each day who was going to come through. So I'd channel at like 5 a.m. before I went to work. I had a part-time job. I was homeless and really poor at the time. I was making, I don't know, $1,100 a month or something, and was house sitting. So when this started, I was house sitting, actually in a beautiful waterfront house on Salt Spring Island, very clear that's imprinted on my mind where this all took place. And I'd go to work and people would go, oh, what are you up to? And I'd be like, oh, nothing, and I just channeled Marilyn Monroe before work or whatever. It was just not something I could talk about. It was so crazy. So anyway,
that's
I've read these.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing, Tina, because we see you now. We see the end product. We see what you have. We see what you have created, but to hear you talking about that, and now me knowing you the way that you are, I don't know how you said yes, because now you're like, hell no. And you said yes, which is so unlike you and so unlikely.
It is unlikely, but obviously it's in my blueprint, this thing. And what I kept going back to in these beginning days, which sounds morbid, but it really wasn't meant in a morbid way, is that because I had attempted suicide when I was 17, I honestly felt that my life didn't belong to me, because Tina had wanted out, and I made a very serious attempt I ended up in hospital and everything. It was a very serious attempt, but that got taken off the table. I swore I'd never do that again. And I had to live my life the way it was playing out. And when this started to happen to me, I really didn't feel like my life was actually mine. I actually didn't deserve it in a way. And it wasn't in a sort of self-deprecating way. It was just like, you know what? If this is what Spirit wants to do with this life that I had no value, I didn't give any value to, I was like, well, that's good. It was really a kind of payback, I guess, in a way, when I think about it, that I owed something for having treated my life with such disrespect and having so much difficulty being on the planet. And of course, that really happened with the Jesus thing, but we'll get to that when he shows up. So, of course, Albert Einstein first, which I think is brilliant, because there is no such thing as the scientific method, because every consciousness affects every experiment. The design of the experiment is affected by the consciousness of the person.
No such thing as objectivity anywhere.
No such thing as objectivity. And I love that that's the message he brought. Jerry Garcia, I didn't really know who Jerry Garcia was, so I had to look him up, which was really, this book was, some of the characters in this book were really the proof I needed that this wasn't my mind making this up, because I was like, how do you channel someone you don't even know who they are? So Jerry Garcia, and then, of course, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who I had heard of, but I didn't know anything about him as a spiritual teacher or anything like that. And, of course, Marilyn. Marilyn probably is the one I identified with the most, because I have had so many body and image issues throughout my life. And my mother named her 3 daughters after beautiful movie stars.
Wow.
So my whole family setup was around beautiful movie stars. So I was named after Ginger on Gilligan's Island, Tina Louise. So she set her daughters up in this celebrity kind of patterning. And I would, in my early life, say I was named after a bimbo. And I think, because like Ginger on Gilligan's Island is a classic bimbo, she's got the whole thing. And I think that really my mum's designation with those names set me off on a trajectory of hell no. Yes. That was not what was going to happen. So I cut my hair off, wore army boots, got fat, educated myself, became very intellectual, and studied a lot. I think in reaction to that being named after a bimbo, I was like, no way, that's not going to happen.
Wow.
And, anyway, so that's just a little bit about my interaction with this particular book. I think it's a very it's too unread, this book. I think it's really got a lot of amazing spiritual principles in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It really does.
The biggest one, and then I'll shut up, but the biggest one for me is that we shouldn't judge someone's life by how they live it. That may be the lesson that they had to learn.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest non-judgment kind of principles there, which is we have no idea what that soul is learning. Especially as we're going through these really tumultuous times of people who are so easy to hate and we have no idea what their particular spiritual journey is and what they've come here to learn, So,
yes, we do forget. So this is definitely a great reminder for all of us.
Okay, so let's see what Ananda says about the cult of celebrity. We're with you again, dear ones. We are very, very excited to be bringing forth material about these many, many subjects that are contained within this text. And our dear one is correct. The apparent superficiality of the subject matter has prevented some, we'll say, deeply spiritual, and we use that in inverted commas, because deeply spiritual people shouldn't be judging a book by its cover. But some deeply spiritual people have resisted reading this book, feeling that it is superficial in some way. But we want to bring forth the very reason that this book was brought into being. The first reason it was brought into being was as an exercise in development for this one. This one was destined to channel Jesus. This one was destined to take on one of the most difficult tasks that can be presented to a channeler, the idea of channeling Jesus. This being would never have been able to accomplish this if she had not channeled the previous 19 personalities. This was a training program for her mostly. So when we look at a channeler such as our dear one, what we are dealing with is all of the conditioning programs around many, many different subjects. Many, many different subjects can limit and cause the mind to contract and slam the door shut. Whether it's sexuality, of course, we tackled that in the first book, sexuality, money, celebrity, family, sickness, health, all of these subjects, you all have, and our dear one had, deep conditioning programs around each of those subjects. And as bringers forth of higher level consciousness teachings, what we had to do and have had to do with every subject that has come through in the form of a book with this being is we have had to deal with the conditioning programs, limitations, restrictions that she has active and has fed and allowed to live in her consciousness. So with this particular book, this was sort of like playing scales for somebody who's learning to play the piano. It gives you some dexterity. It gives you some opening and willingness to step onto a stage that you never, ever dreamt you'd step onto. Now, of course, with her assignment of channeling Jesus, that psychological journey was a big deal in and of itself. Many of you who have made contact with Jesus, our beloved teacher, have had a demonstration by another being so that you can see that your life doesn't come to an end and that you don't get thrown into a mental asylum. Our dear one did not have that luxury. She was by herself, learning by herself, and this too was part of her blueprint. Part of her blueprint was to develop the courage to do this alone. Now, she has a lot of support now. She has all of you that support her in many, many ways. She has a wonderful team of beings behind her that give her love and support and daily encouragement. But back then, it was very, very important for her to do this by herself, because in the end, that is what she has to do. She has to live with the consequences of the work that she has chosen, both good, bad, and indifferent. And she has to learn to tolerate the slings and arrows of judgment that are hurled against her, and develop the backbone and the thick skin to deal with that. And so this book was part of that training program. The second role of this book was indeed to lure people in who believe in the cult of celebrity. Now, our dear one's mother is a perfect example. So we're going to use her as an example. Her naming of her daughters after movie stars shows you her value system. She values beauty and she values fame. And she values women being viewed in a particular way. And so when this book came across her path, the beautiful females within the covers of this book were the ones that she went to immediately and read immediately and valued above all of the other contributors in the book. So what does this show you? This shows you that that being's particular mindset was open in a certain way to certain subjects, to certain beings, to certain appearances, to certain messages. Now, if we had tried to force our dear one's mother to read a treatise by Jerry Garcia, that would have met absolutely with absolutely no results at all. The mind wouldn't have been open. She wouldn't have been curious. She wouldn't have been interested in any way, shape, or form in what the message was. In fact, she would have dismissed Jerry Garcia because in her mind, he's quite unattractive and so therefore valueless. So this is the way that a conditioned mind can work. Now, our dear one's mother is an extreme person. And one of the reasons that our dear one chose to be born to her was because she was an extreme person. This extreme person has required extreme responses and reactions from our dear one over her lifetime. And she continues to work to overcome the very, very intense programming that she was subject to within this family. Now, it's been a difficult journey for her in that sense within her family because of the nature of this particular parent. But the fact of the matter is it has given her opportunities to overcome things that were very, very difficult. So when you're thinking about your families, when you're thinking about your parents or the difficulties of siblings who are attacking you, judging you, getting into fights with you, ignoring you, abandoning you, whatever the subject is, we want you to remember that the situation that you are born into is asking a very, very specific thing of you. It's asking you to develop an aspect of your consciousness that this particular family member, the challenging family member, is asking you to develop. And that is the way that we'd like you to look at it. So in reflection, each of these characters in this book have been called up onto the stage, so to speak, to give their message to a particular section of society who would not listen to another person on stage, for example. So our dear one, because she is very, very curious about all spiritual messages, found all of the messages interesting. And we would like you to, as we go through this book club, consider each person. And if you have one that you aren't particularly interested in, we'd like you to spend even a little more focus on that particular being, because what's happening is your conditioning is saying, oh, that message isn't that important to me because of the person who's giving it to you. It could be that John Lennon's music doesn't appeal to you. It could be that you're a Republican and the Democratic Kennedy brothers aren't in your wheelhouse, so to speak. But we want you to look at each message that is coming through as openly as possible. If you're finding that one doesn't appeal to you, reread it again and ask yourself, am I close to this message? Is my mind not willing to entertain this idea? It could indeed be the most important message for you. You must remember that the ego does not want you to look at certain things. It does not want you to look at the things that are enhancing your separation experience. Why? Well, it wants you to have the separation experience. So it will say, oh, don't bother with that one. But in actual fact, that is the one that will be the most enlightening and perhaps challenging for you. So let's get to the answer for the question that Carol so wisely brought up, the whole cult of celebrity. Now, our dear one was raised in a family where Entertainment Tonight was watched at 7 o'clock every night, and it was about the beautiful women. It was an indoctrination program into the beauty myth. Who's wearing what to the Oscars, who's aging poorly. The entire focus of her family's observation of celebrity was around the beauty of women. It was part of the indoctrination program. And of course, with our dear one, it has caused a lot of difficulties, and it has been one of her life's hurdles, let us say, but it is okay. Many of you have these hurdles because you are raised in the West, and you get to see Victoria's Secret models, and you get to see the fact that all of the male newscasters are allowed to age and have receding hairlines and different weights, and all of the women newscasters are beautiful and seemingly ageless. There is an unspoken program that you are all indoctrinated into, both male and female. Men, for example, will find it very, very hard to understand the self-consciousness sometimes that their partners experience, because they are not indoctrinated into the same form of self-deprecation and self-loathing. They are not taught to constantly value their bodies as the way to get what they want. The celebrity cult does indeed do that, and you will notice that the only females in the celebrity cult that are not slim, not attractive, are comedians, or the actor in a movie that is the butt of the jokes. Those are the only women in the cult of celebrity that are allowed to be less than the perfect hair, perfect face, perfect figure, all of those things. So one of the greatest damaging effects of the cult of celebrity is this lessening of the feminine, in the sense that you are not supposed to be different shapes. You are not supposed to be different appearances. You are meant to conform. The nose is meant to look a certain way. The eyes are meant to look a certain way. The hair is meant to look a certain way. And if you don't look that way, well, you better have something else going on, a big set of boobs or a nice bottom or something. So when we are looking at the power structure of Western culture, and that's one of the reasons that we have come through a Western woman, is because we want you to understand what is happening through the cult of celebrity. And this is, of course, one of the reasons this book is formatted in the way it is, because it will get your attention. There are indeed beings who are watching this particular broadcast who did not watch the other broadcast, because it's about celebrities, and the cult of celebrity is even playing out within this community. And we smile at that. We do not judge you for that. In fact, that is a good thing. If you did not show up for the sex book, then you showed up for the celebrity book, and that is a good thing. But you may want to look at that as a limitation in your own mind. You may want to look at that and think, oh, that is interesting. I showed up to this book club because of the celebrity nature of it. And am I disappointed? Am I excited? What's going on inside of me? Why is this important to me? And so when we look at the cult of celebrity, it is being used. It is being used to disempower. It is being used to distract. It is being used to get you to compare all of the time. And so one of the things that we encourage, if you are suffering from any of the things that we have mentioned, self-loathing, self-deprecating thoughts, especially about the physical body, especially about aging and your value in society, what we'd like you to do is to not go to the celebrities for your entertainment. It is designed to disempower. Now, there will be those of you that think, well, I just enjoy watching the Oscars, or I enjoy seeing what the latest movie is. And there is, of course, the enjoyment that comes from feeding the ego. The ego loves this. The ego loves to get a bit of gossip about who's marrying who, or who's dating who, or who's aging badly, or who got fat all of a sudden. This is one of the favorite things of the ego, to see the celebrity falling from grace, falling off their pedestal. So be aware that it is used as a manipulation. We have merely jumped on the coattails of that manipulation, but to use it for good, to use it for getting people's attention who may not buy a book about channeling Jesus, who may not buy a book about sexuality, who may not buy a book about love, but they will buy a book about John Lennon. They will buy a book about Jerry Garcia. And our dear one has experienced this throughout the years of people saying, I bought the book because of this particular celebrity. I bought the book because of that particular celebrity.